Hello, my name is Dr. Brian Raid, and I am a naturopathic doctor, and this is a video about nutrigenomic testing. So nutrigenomic testing is where we essentially can analyze a person's genetic code, usually from a saliva sample, and with that analysis of that genetic code, we can determine whether they have certain mutations in certain key locations of genes in their body, and if there are mutations in certain areas of those genes, it can impact the function of that gene, or rather, it impacts the function of the proteins or enzymes that are coded for by that gene, and thereby can impact a person's physiological function. So, with that relatively wordy definition out of the way, basically it tells us or gives us insight into whether or not certain parts of a person's physiology might be not functioning quite as optimally based on these tiny little genetic mutations. It's really important to note, pardon me, that it's really important to note that these tiny mutations in the DNA don't specifically dictate disease states in the vast majority of cases. There are exceptions to that rule, but the vast majority of these are really giving us mostly giving us insight into whether a person is going to have an increased susceptibility to certain health-related issues. So for example, if a person had a lot of mutations in the genes that code for the enzymes that regulate histamine metabolism, that person might be more prone to suffer from a condition called histamine intolerance or mast cell activation syndrome. Or for example, if a person had a lot of mutations in genes related to their methylation function, they might have a harder time detoxifying certain things from their bodies, like heavy metals, might have a harder time making glutathione, which is a really important antioxidant for brain health and eye health and various other things, etc. So again, it's really telling us mostly about predispositions. So doing this type of testing is useful essentially in two different ways. One is running this testing in patients who are symptomatic, and so by figuring out what their genetic predispositions are, it can give us more insight into what types of therapies might be helpful for them. So for example, a patient who is suffering from neurological symptoms or neurological issues like MS or Parkinson's, or they're having a lot of brain fog, or everyone in their family has Alzheimer's disease and they're wondering if there's anything that, not everyone in their family currently, but everyone eventually seems to develop Alzheimer's at a certain point in their life, and so they want to know if there's something they can do kind of prophylactically or proactively to kind of work on their brain health or whatnot. Then if we did this genomic profiling and we saw that there were a lot of mutations in their ability to make glutathione, this really important brain antioxidant, then that would give us, we could use that information to say, well, we really should probably consider maybe supplementing it with glutathione, like either orally or with an IV, or looking at things that might be depleting their glutathione levels so that we can try to bolster that as much as we can. Conversely, someone who has a lot of mutations around, has significant mutations related to their ability to metabolize certain neurotransmitters like serotonin or dopamine, they might be more prone to have, say, anxiety issues or depression issues or hyperactivity issues or addiction potential or whatever it happens to be. So by knowing about this information in patients who are symptomatic, it can help us to tailor treatment. And then the other population that this testing can be useful in is in folks who are not symptomatic, or they just have, they're maybe feeling a little more tired or something, but nothing majorly impactful symptom-wise in their lives. And by looking at their genomic profile, we can look to see, well, where might they have more of a predisposition? So kind of going back to that patient who says, there's a strong family history with, Alzheimer's or other types of dementia or whatnot in my family. Well, but I'm feeling really good right now. I'm 35 or 45 and I'm feeling good. I'm not symptomatic, but I just don't want to, I want to, know if there's anything I can do to try to mitigate my risk of developing these conditions that seem to be so prevalent in my family. Then running that type of profile on them could be useful, because it might show us, oh, you've got issues with your glutathione production pathways, you've got issues with your expression of something called NRF2, which is kind of this master control switch, so to speak, or master signaling molecule around all antioxidant systems in the body, or we might look at certain other things like something called their ApoE4 status and whatnot. And so with respect to the genomic profiling, those are the two kind of main groups that we might want to look at running this test in. So I'm going to say a little bit more about genomic profiling, but I'm going to save that for another video. So I hope this is interesting up to this point, and if you want to know a bit more about some sort of clinical applications of this, and maybe which types of companies or which company that I like to use when it comes to analyzing this DNA, because anyone who's heard of this, like, oh, there's like Strategene, and there's oh my gosh, there's several different ones out there. There's the mthfr.com and the Nutrigenomic Research Institute, the various ones out there. So I'm happy to talk about the ones that the one or ones that I generally use, and I'll talk about that in the next video or two.